Cut to the chase, one of his generals, his name was Antiochus Epiphanes. That word Epiphanes, or his name meant, it translates God revealed. Not big G, little g. Because Antiochus walked around and he thought he was a god. He was the personification of Hitler, or he was the personification of evil. He was very demonic and very in his ruling. When Alexander divided up his kingdom, Israel and its domain fell under his Antiochus Epiphanes' rule, and then he changed the party. Whereas Alexander wasn't his whole thought was trying to get people to be Hellenists, think like Greek, or think this way. But Alexander the Great went in war with the people over their gods. He didn't mind the Jews serving Jehovah, Yahweh, because they were very polytheistic. So the more the merrier. That wasn't a big issue. That's how come when Paul went out in the city and started seeing all those deities on the hill. Alexander didn't mind all that. Antiochus Epiphanes did. He wanted to take and have all the Jewish people, as you know, he wanted to destroy their faith and make them all Hellenists. To the point that he says, how do I go about doing this? He had a force intent that drove the people. It says if they didn't convert, the people were forced into a choice. A lot of the people had become accustomed to all the games and to all the pleasure of Greek life. And they even got to the point as they were just being forced to change, I really think through the thought. Do I want to change? Do I not want to change? But Antiochus, when he did this, he made the choices black or white. There was no middle of the road. Either you're going to do this or not. He told them the decision was black or white. You either choose God or this new worldview. No middle ground. There's no gray area. And in doing so, the people were stuck. Many of the people chose to compromise. It's a time we're talking about blending. Are you going to be part of this or not? So when he gives them to the point where he stops all the Jewish lifestyle per se as you see it. No more moeds, no more celebrating the feasts and festivals, no more circumcision, no more kosher eating. In fact, he'll go into the temple and says, no more worshiping this deity. In fact, if you go and get in and worship, he put his image inside the temple. When you go into the temple, you worship me. So, and if you get into the story, and especially into history, it talked about in order to make people do this, he would do cruel atrocities to them. Like say if a mother, they did circumcision or whatever, he would kill not only the child but the mother and hang them both before the people, let them know that it was unacceptable. If he caught them doing anything that was Jewish per se, the roads were lined with them. They were doing, I don't want to get so graphic with all the things that they did in order to get the people to convert. But again, because of some of the pleasures of it, of the styles and the things, one thing transpired among the people. It became almost like a civil war, like in our country, where some of the people didn't mind it because they had Hellenistic way of thinking. You're talking about the Jews. They're thinking like Hellenists. Many chose to compromise and to blend and to assimilate, taking on Greek names even, disowning themselves altogether. He says where they took names like Jacob's and changed them from Jacob's to Jason's. For Yaakov or Jacob's to James. Miriam's became Mary. Greek names, simple names. Some of them were even going as far as renouncing the covenant relationship to God himself. They were doing the outward signs and totally abandoned what they've been called to do. I call it, like you said, it's like they grabbed the spirit of Esau, where to hold on to the worldview, they're selling their souls for a bowl of soup. They stepped back for the moment of the pleasure for the world at that time. And those that stood firm, again, they're brutally tortured or murdered. Thousands died during this time. That's how come they call it a spirit of seasonal darkness. But you know, in the midst of all this, the thing that set this whole thing in perspective is with all this, the evilness of this darkness that is running rampant throughout the land, it ran into an unlikely event in the small village of Moedim. This is where the spiritual war of compromise came face to face with an unbridled passion for holiness, for righteousness, and for the sanctity of his name. In this little village, there was a little old priest called Matthias Maccabee. You know, sometimes the enemy can get over, he can run rampant until he thinks he's in charge and he really isn't in charge. And the ruthlessness and the ugliness of what they were trying to bring to bear, they come to this little small town, and there stood a little priest. I always like to try to picture what this little guy looks like. I bet he's probably, stand up, sweetheart. I was teasing. I'm just joking. I was just see if you guys will listen. I was teasing. Hiram, can I use your couch tonight? I was teasing. But one thing about him, I speak and talk about, he's a righteous little old priest, little man. If I'm talking about somebody being righteous, that I can see her. She would have been, Anita Maccabee, she would have been a great one. Because her zealous and her hunger for holiness and the way that she stood firm, especially if the guy comes in trying to be a bully. She hates bullies. And they'll come in and they're going to try to demand. They have distorted and polluted the temple to the point that they were slaughtering pigs and spreading blood and using the feces everywhere to defile God's house. You run rampant that you come with this mindset and you think you can just do anything. They walk up in this little town, a little teeny town called Moedim. Little small village, and you think, if I can do this in Jerusalem, and I got the priests and the people to submit to what I'm doing in Jerusalem, and I can do it in Granger, and I can do it in all the little small towns leading this way, what is Moedim? So they show up in Moedim with this general, with a charge that we're taking over every place of worship of this Yahweh, of this God. And if it hasn't submitted to a Hellenistic thought or to our mindset, they're leaving carnage all along the way. So they come into this town, and here's this little priest standing who's in charge of the local synagogue, house of worship. And they make the same charge that they did in Jerusalem. Because then they bring up this, and not just a pig, they do something that's very devastating. They bring in a female pig. And they realize that the female pig is pregnant. And to offer it on the altar. So as they do this, they're trying to do everything, because this is what Zeus, or what they do, as they would see this, they see the life in the life in the life in the life was something that was very glorious to them. So as they challenge the challenge the people in the town, they says if they don't do this, they're going to start wiping the people out. Well, it's one apostate priest, this one guy that's, he's already converted as such. He looks up and says, I'll take care of it. I'll do it myself. So he walks up, grabs the sword. He walks up. This sword was given to us by Hiram Maccabee. He carries the blades. So the priest walks up, the soldier walks up and he tells the priest, he will begin throughout the line, start wiping people out unless they want to sacrifice a pig. He needed the priest in order to lead the town, because if you get the high priest or the priest that's over it, then the people will follow suit. So he'll start with God's hires. The guy gets up and says, he grabs a sword, and he's thinking like, bring me he said, I'll take it, bring me the sacrifice. And I can't do the pig. They try to bring the pig, so he's going to do the slaughter. There's a righteous indignation. There's a hunger for God's presence. It's when you ask for his glory. It's that when you stand in his presence, you try to say, what is enough? When is enough is enough. As the apostate stood, it said Maccabee jumped up, grabbed the sword. I can almost see him like little Jedi. He grabbed the sword. He takes out the apostate priest, and in the same swing, takes out the general who's calling the orders. Then he turns around and starts looking at the other soldiers that's with the general. And by now, it only takes a spark. It only takes a flame. It only takes one that something rises up with them that's going to make a difference. And all the people who were kind of cowering at the thought of these Greek generals that came into the city, something birthed within them. A righteous indignation stirred within them as well. It's kind of like when Goliath stood in the valley, bellowing to the Jews all over the mountain. Saw all the army, everyone frozen as they're looking down there. You got one man who's standing out in the middle, who's blaspheming against their God, who's telling what he can do, and he has no honor for them. But when that little shepherd boy came in the middle of them, and here they are with all the weaponry, with all their skill, with all how they fight, and all the shields, and he tries to show that it's not, he don't need all that. He shows up with a slingshot and misses this giant. Boom! When he slings it, all of a sudden, all courage comes back to the nation on the hill. What? One man had them frozen that they couldn't come off the mountain, but when he said, boom, boom, oh. And they said, they all ran off the mountain and started chasing everybody. Now they got the zeal. Same thing with Maccabee. He walks up and goes, boom, 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 boom. He had 5 sons. His sons look up and see, they know the dad. I had a mom who was about this big. Had all those big boys around her. We cut up. For some reason, height, size, I don't care how many letters you got in football or how well you can run, all your athletic prowess meant nothing. She would say something like, didn't I tell you? You stand here with all your letters and all your decorations, how well you are, and I can fight out in the street and everything else, and friends all around who think I'm tough. And she would walk up to me with a righteous indignation because I think I'm grown. I'm looking at her because I can talk to all my friends. I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not afraid of you, and I'm just talking big. She had to be about this good. And she walked up, and she would stand there, grab you, and, bring you down to size. And I'm like this. And then from here, she went there. Didn't I tell you have to do this? She's pointing and talking. Anita seen her do it one time. She didn't use it, pretty much didn't use the pointer finger. Her finger's like this. And she'd go, didn't I? So you can hear it. And she'd be going, What did I tell you? There's no such thing as child abuse during these times. This was called righteous listening. And then everything in the house was moved by her. When Maccabee did this, his boys knew he had them all in line. They jump up and they all enter into the fray. The villagers, everything rises up. And right in the midst of all this demonic darkness and all this thought and all this thing of blaspheming and trying to defile temples and bringing things against the living God and all this, there's a righteous zeal that kind of swelled up among all the people that was there. And a spark was lit, a flame was lit right in the middle of all the darkness. Hope, life, and the righteousness of the living God was illuminated in that place. People didn't see the Greek. They didn't see the army. They didn't see the sword. What they saw was the God. And when he did this, I love that part. I said, in the midst of this, a flame was lit. In the midst of the darkness when Maccabee stood. And when he did what he did, you know what transpired? The God of miracles showed up. They call themselves trying to intimidate, but what they didn't see was the unexpected. Who would think you'd go into a little dinky town after you conquered all the generals, you walk all across the country, you're part of Alexander the Great's army, your people are setting a philosophy that's dominating the land, you walk into a little town, but you didn't realize God lived there. And so you walk in and you put forth your thought and all your strength, and here's this little old guy. I didn't like to try to think of how he probably looked, but lived long enough to see God move. No, they ain't intimidated by this stuff. He probably gummed while they're talking. We're going to do this and we're going to do it. I see them people with no teeth. They kind of rub the gum. I can see probably something like that. And then talk to them the same way. And he looked at himself and he says, whether these people do it or not, I, my sons, will not move until that other guy comes out and tries to do what he's going to do. And I can just see him. I'm telling you, I can see him. He probably seen that apostate priest reach over and grab the sword, start walking that way, and chewing, stop. And when he moved, the season of Hanukkah took birth. Because what happened was, at the time, the odds were 100 to 1. When he killed the apostate priests and the generals, Matthias and his sons took off into the wilderness, and followed by a band of men that continued to grow and follow the hunger for holiness. And they began a campaign that lasted 3 years of guerrilla warfare. They come in and out of battle. They fought them like the people weren't unaware of at any time in their knowledge. You ever see those movies where people, they come walking out and they're going like this? Into battle, Civil War battles, on this level. Boom, boom, boom. People, they're drumming so everyone can see them. And they're loading the guns. People are looking at them, shooting. I'm thinking like, I'd be hiding behind a tree. I'd be laying down behind a rock. Why are you going to stand out there and open doing all this stuff when somebody can just take you out? Boom, they're all falling back and just have a whole volley of shots and everyone falls down. The next one's walk up. Boom, boom. And I'm thinking like, that's madness. I'd be the very first one behind a rock shooting and run over here. Shooting, that's the Maccabees, guerrilla warfare. They weren't just walking out here. They were fighting from the trees, from the forest. They were fighting a battle like they weren't even aware of. And this band of righteous men regained that temple and all the lands that they had gotten over the course of the 3 years. In fact, it took them 3 years to get it back. But all this began on what we've known as the 25th of Kislev, which is where everyone gets in talking about the 25th. They put it close to like Christmas or whatever. On the 25th of Kislev is when all this took place. When they entered that little town and they ran into a hornet's nest. 3 years to the date, that little hornet's nest moved from the little town of Moadim all the way back through Jerusalem. And they conquered this huge army of the Grecian army. And in essence sense, when they recaptured it, it's kind of like what happened in the 67 war, or like when Israel became a state in 48, and they said they're surrounded by all those nations they weren't supposed to last. They said, in fact, they said the president told them, the president of the United States told them, don't announce your statehood until they get other things in place and everything. They said, because you'll be wiped out. You're surrounded by Arab nations that are 3 times your size. Your nation will not last a day. But somehow, that Maccabee guy showed up again. Because of 1948, they said, what happens? They said what was not supposed to be. They turned around and, with all odds against them, turned around and won that war. Israel became a state. Then they said they did it again in 67. And they gave them, and they ended up getting back the temple, all the land, the Temple Mountain, Jerusalem, and the areas. But they said the people wept. I love the old newsreels when they said when the people just announced on the radio that Israel would now become a state. They had a land against all odds. In 67, against all odds. There was such a joy, there was such a reverential appreciation of the miraculous work of a God who hoovers over them. But when the God of miracles shows up, they let them know that all things are possible. The same thing happened here. When they walked back into that city on 25th of Kislev, and they regained this desecrated temple. The feelings was so great as trying to restore what the enemy tried to blaspheme in their face. So thus we had the story of Hanukkah, because they said when they went back in, they only to get it. And they walked inside and they seen the carnage of what the people done, between all the pollution of the altar, of the holy vessels, of everything that they had seen that was righteous. And then but one thing they wanted to do is to start restoring the temple after the rededication. So we'll rededicate it and give it back to God. It's God's. And so once they finished the rededication, they wanted to light the menorahs that was supposed to be like eternal flames. But when they went to do it, that's when they found that they had gone, that the Anunnakis Epithomes had gone through and they destroyed all the sacred oil. And so what happens when you only have enough oil for one day? Even though you have the ability, what do? You follow along with what God told Moses when he stood before the Red Sea. What do you have in your hand? I said, they had the flax for enough for one day. And God says, told them they went forth to clean up the temple and to relight it, and to light the menorah. Thus we have Hanukkah. It takes place and they celebrate for 8 days. I'll give you another question. The question comes up and says, why 8 days? Why was Hanukkah set up for 8 days? Well, for 2 reasons. Let's do what it said. The first one is in honor of the season of Sukkot. Sukkot, which is the season of tabernacles, they said, Hanukkah just happened after it. Anunnakis had prevented them from celebrating any of the God's moeds. So they patterned Hanukkah after Sukkot, which is why you have both called the Feast of Lights, the Festival of Lights. and they happened during that time in this fall. So they stepped back in to say they wanted to recover God's moedims, his purposes, his festivals, his feasts, his God's appointed times. That's what the word moedim means, God's appointed times. And so they said that, so it said that the pattern, the 8th day, which Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, lasts for 7 days. And then the 8th day is the rejoicing of the Torah. The second reason is in honor of the miracle of the oil. Again, the flax that they've started to burn, instead of it burning for 1 day, it lasted for 8 days. You know, they had a discussion as to the scholars or the rabbis, chief rabbi. They're asking on how to light to recognize this day among the people. Some of them talk about they should light all the candles at one time and let them stay lit for the full duration of the feast. Others came back and says, therefore, no, we should light them 1 day for every day of the 8 days. And there's pretty much the Rabbi Hillel, who's a strong proponent for that, won out, which is why we go out and we light one for every day, as opposed to all at once. And they said, well, why would you want them light one for every day as opposed to not all at once? I like his thought. He says, because the miracle continued. It grew in greatness each day. He says, when they thought it was for 1 day, it was a miracle that it lasted 2. When it stayed lit and it's going to 3 and the 4, he said they could see the hand of God continue to grow with the miracle of the lighting. He said the miracle grew in greatness each day. I like that. That's powerful. So in honor of the menorah, when God breathed upon Bezalel back at the time of Moshe, and he told them how to develop the menorah, he said it was patterned after he told Moses the pattern, gave Moses the pattern, and just patterned off what they'd seen in heaven. So he breathed over Bezalel so that he can be able to create this piece in one piece, gold. So rather than go back and try to duplicate what God's piece was, they created a special one, which was, it's not a 7 branch, but also to acknowledge for the 8 days. And when the Maccabees or the Hasmoneans created this candelabra, which we call a Hanukkah, obviously to be lit during the time of Hanukkah, they put this center candle right in the middle of it, which we understand it to be the shamash. The shamash, which was the greater light that stands in the middle, it takes on the name. The word shamash translates the set apart one. I think it's a picture of God that they put right in the middle of it to try to see the magnitude of what he did during this darkened time. It takes on the name the set apart one, or it's called the servant candle, or the caretaker. It speaks of the covenantal hand of God during that time. And from that candle, all the other ones are lit. The center one ministers to the others. It's like God had told them, they did what they could. As they stood and the righteous flame and the righteous indignation or the hunger for holiness was stirred up inside them, then he lit them up to bring forth this miracle. So, you see, when the season of Hanukkah, as you stand before that Hanukkah, it's simply not an ancient battle of the Jewish people, but it's a battle for all mankind. It's a battle of religious freedom. For up until that time, no country would ever go to war for religious reasons. The Hebrews or the Jewish people were the only one that was monotheistic. They only served one God. They wouldn't serve anything else. No country would go to war for a God. If they ran to you and you had your God, then they'll just take your God and put it with their gods, and they'll stay with a polytheistic mindset. But what Ananias and Epiphanes ran into, and what they found really strange about these people, is that they serve one God. And it's that call that set them apart in the world. For it was the first battle of its origin. It's the first battle for religious freedom. Hanukkah was a battle over right over wrong. It's a fight for what's right. So from ancient history until today, and everything in between, when we stand, we look at that light of Hanukkah, we come into the season, we are to remember. God will have us remember, just like the Maccabees. We are to be the salt of the earth. We are to make a difference. And we are to, as you say, be a light on a hill, a flame. And let your light shine among a darkened world. As we come into the season of Hanukkah. And he tells us that as amazing as we will see, and that'll be next week when people start bringing their other Hanukkahs in, that the Hanukkah lights aren't there for their beauty. That's not what we look at them for, or for their enjoyment. In fact, it says that very specific thing in regard to Hanukkah. That the Hanukkah lights are not meant to be lights like in a room, but they're meant to be displayed to make a statement. The light is not for lights, the light is for a witness. And that's how come, first in its origin, the light kept the Hanukkahs were never to be inside. They were supposed to be outside, that the world could see that there is a God and the miracle of it. So what they would do, that's how come like the rabbi, when he puts the thing up on the city, displays it outside for the world to see. That's what was originally designed. Person in the homes, what they would do, they tell you, put a Hanukkah outside the door of entry. So when people look at your home, they can see that you are one of the difference makers. You are light of the world. Hanukkah started coming inside pretty much during the time of the Holocaust. When persecution became so great, and when people tried to display the lights, it brought them inside, partly for the safety of their lives. But when they start coming inside, then the thought was they would sit inside and you put them in the window. If they weren't outside the house, they could be in the window where people would just see. So remember, they said the Hanukkah lights aren't there for beauty or enjoyment, but rather in these times to inspire us to be a flame. We live in times right now where that's being pushed as really strong. You know, people looking at you and say, are you Christian? Are you a believer? The thought is saying, are you a flame or are you blending? You know, are you light or have you lost your saltiness? But it's during this time when the lights go up to display that a great miracle happened here is where God says, we as the light of the earth, light of the world. So Yeshua said during his Beatitudes, he said you're supposed to be like a light set on a lamppost that they can see to glorify your Father. So during this time of Hanukkah, like when I go up and I'm lighting that thing, or you have your Hanukkahs to light and put them in your home inside your windows, you're supposed to look at them and think about yourself and say, am I a flame? So may this season continue to inspire you of the faithfulness of our wondrous, miraculous, covenant-keeping God, who truly is the light of the world. Yeshua stood and said, I am the light. I'm the one that spoke to the darkness. The darkness couldn't comprehend it. He says, I am the one who hovers I'm the living. He's the light. He's the living flame. Amen? Amen.